Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Business Brunch, brought to you by B4. Now, last week it was announced that Jeff Bezos, or Bezos, depending on how you like to name him, of Amazon was stepping down as leader of the colossal phenomenon that is Amazon. So we decided to bring to you the Business Brunch, talking with experts about replacing a leader. And this morning I'm joined by Tim Vorley, Pro Vice Chancellor and Dean at Oxford Brookes Business School, psychotherapist Gary Bloom, and Principal at Childwell College, Stephen Clark. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
So, Tim, over to you. You're heading up, you're a new leader at Oxford Brookes Business School. How's it been coming into a new organisation that you've not actually even been to yet?
Yeah, no. First of all, thanks for having me, and it's great to be able to kind of contribute to the discussion this morning. And you're absolutely right. So I stepped into Oxford Brookes on the 1st of June last year. I can say what we're now on the 10th of February, and I still haven't been to Oxford. So working as a leader and taking on that position remotely has been extremely challenging, and probably one of the toughest periods that higher education's faced with regards to the pandemic, both in terms of how we've had to restructure, how we've had to reorganise, and really I think kind of the impact of that on both the employees within Brookes, but also our students and our learners. And I think that as part of coming in as a leader, I think there's been this kind of pressure to succeed immediately. I think it's one of those kind of big things, thinking that not only am I taking the reins from a kind of a retiree who'd had a successful reign at Oxford Brookes in Chris Blackburn, but thinking about how now I can kind of take those reins, be that successor, and make my mark as well. And I think that the facilitated transition, if you like, that I had was a welcome run-in. But I think more than ever now, there's very much a kind of a need to try and make sure that I'm positioned in Brookes and the business school particularly to be an institution that is forward-facing and that is future-ready, while dealing with, I guess, the fires that all organisations are dealing with as a result of COVID. So a huge kind of challenge, but I guess one that I personally wanted to kind of take on. I was looking forward to it. I came into it with my eyes open, in the sense that I was interviewed during COVID as well. So it wasn't something that was unexpected, in the sense I knew where we were. But it really, for me, is about thinking about the future. And I guess the interesting thing when we think about kind of Amazon and Jeff's position there and the transition now to kind of Andy Jassy is how he announced it. I think it was a kind of a very clear incoming, the message and the positive, and how that was positioned about the new executive chair role and what Jeff's going to be doing at Amazon, but also with Andy Jassy and the experience he brings, was hugely important in having that credibility. And I think that in some ways I kind of benefited from that transition at Brookes, that introduction and the credibility that I tried to bring into the institution as a new leader. But for me, one of the other big things that I guess that I had to do, as well as trying to kind of impress and succeed, making sure that the machine keeps running in challenging circumstance, was to really kind of determine my approach, present my leadership style, and how I'm going to go about this. And I think that a key aspect for that has been communication. And I mentioned at the beginning, I've not been to Oxford yet, but I've done 149 one-to-ones now with colleagues around the institution, which is a massive investment in time, but one that I can honestly say has paid dividends. I probably know the organisation better than if I'd have been in Oxford for the 179 days that I've now been working there. And I think that it's that approach and trying to kind of make that commitment and invest that really kind of, for me, has kind of been a big effort, but it has paid off. And getting to know people, seeing them through the screen, the virtual meetings, the one-to-ones, not just doing the kind of the big all staffs, has been absolutely key in trying to make this work. And I think where we're trying to go now, it's really kind of set the tone. It's really about trying to kind of transition in, establish how I want to communicate, how I want to kind of set that vision, but doing it remotely and trying to kind of keep people on board has been a challenge. And it's one of those things that I think I've learned as I've gone along. It's not something that I've had to manage an organisation remotely before. I'm looking forward to being on campus and getting there again, and rather than just seeing my office from outside a window, being able to get behind the desk and with that kind of meet the people around it. So It has been a challenge. It's been a kind of a great privilege to be able to come in. I'm hugely grateful to the team that I've got around me at the exec level. We have not made changes to the personnel, but we've restructured some of the roles to make it into an organisation that I think we have the ability to become and develop into. And very much, I suppose, that is all about this setting the tone, trying to kind of keep that communication clear. And I think that one of the key roles that certainly I've tried to do in coming in, and I guess will be Andy Jassi's challenge when he takes on the reins at Amazon later this year, is to set that vision. I think it's about having that kind of clear identity, the direction of travel, and ensuring that people have that kind of that shared commitment to supporting the delivery of that. And that, again, has been something which at Brooks I've been kind of working on diligently in the background while trying to look serene and making sure that the swan continues to float with the current, while actually making sure that there is a lot of work that's going into this behind the scenes. And so it's no mean task for Andy Jassi. I think having Jeff in that executive chair role is still going to be a challenge for him. I think that in some ways, when your predecessor is still in the building or around the building at least, that does add to the tension. And I can say this, my predecessor still is, he's still around, and it's great to have him there because it is that point of reference. But I have to say that I've been given that freedom and I don't feel that pressure that I'm being watched, but it is good to know that the institutional history and the memories there, if we need to draw on it or go back as well. So I suppose that opens up the conversation, and I'm sure that Gary and Stephen have got their insights to add in as well.
Well, before I bring Gary in, the more you went on, especially when you said that Chris is still in the building, it reminded me that you're very much the academic equivalent to David Moyes coming in to fill Sir Alex Ferguson's shoes. And on that note, Gary, you're operating in the sporting world, not predominantly, but a lot, obviously, and it'd be interesting to get your take and on Tim's comments. And thanks, Tim, for your opening comments.
Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me. It's a real privilege to be here at this brunch. There's a lot of interesting stuff that goes on. I can think of about 50 different little strands when I hear Tim talking. I'll start with Amazon, because though Amazon has been a huge commercial success, 1.1 billion employees, the turnover has gone up 50% during lockdown. We have a story of unparalleled success in the 25 years since they've been going. There is an underside to all this, and it's interesting that Bezos steps down when there's a federal commission looking at some of the practices of the company and how they treat their employees. And I'm not here to sit in judgment of what they're doing, what they're not doing, but there's been a lot of media stuff around, are the factories COVID compliant? There's stuff around wages and delivery people, delivery men and women who are delivering Amazon parcels, and whether their wages are correct. This is where the Federal Commission in America are about to step in. And there's a huge fine coming for Amazon. There's a whole issue around their PR and the amount of tax that they've paid here in the UK. So I would say, I mean, Bezos is an incredible businessman. He's left an incredible legacy. But one of the legacies that I don't feel as a sort of ingenue, somebody who doesn't know the organization particularly well, is the thing that doesn't seem to add up for me in the most spectacular way his business does add up, is how the employees maybe feel about working for his company. And there have been just too many of those, really? Is that what's really happened? And when I was training in this to be a psychotherapist, my trainer once said to me, Gary, once is an accident, twice is a coincidence, 3 times is a signal. And we've had 3 big incidents of stuff going on at Amazon where the employees have just not felt happy about working in such a big organization. I'm not here to pass comment on that, but I would say to Tim and some of Tim's comments, to me, the most important people in any organization, be it Oxford United, be it Oxford Brookes, be it Chartwell College, whoever it is, the most important people are the people you employ. Because if you get that right, your business will succeed. And I think one of the most frustrating things is when I stand up in front of CEOs and people who run all big organizations and say, well, who are the most important people in your business? And I'll say, well, of course, it's the clients. I'll say, no, I'm sorry, that's wrong. the most important people in any organization are the people you employ. Because if you get that bit right, they'll find you the clients. And I have enormous respect for Stephen and Tim. They're in the heart, to me, of a sector that is going through unbelievable change because of COVID. And I would say the biggest increase in my client base in the last year has not been footballers or sports people, although those have rocketed. It's been young students, roughly between the ages of 18 and 25, who have enormous psychological problems thinking about how they deal with their studies, exams. Do they stay at college? Do they stay at university? Is there any point? What's the point of going to college? Is it safe there? Should I do something else? So I'm not here, please don't hear any criticism of the education sector. Oh boy, I wouldn't want to be in that sector at the moment, because it is going to be redefined because of all the online learning. How do you draw people into that sector? How do you fund it? How do you get the best out of your staff? These are huge questions. But I go back to with the one constant I hope in any message that I will always come up with is, it's always your employees who are the most important people in any organisation.
Brilliant, Gary. I bring Stephen in. Tim, do you want to respond to Gary's points?
No, yeah, absolutely. I mean, absolutely. In terms of kind of the employees, I mean, that we are a business that, like many businesses, is a people business, and I think that recognising the challenges through COVID that many of the staff have had, both the academic staff who are the frontline teaching, and also the kind of professional services staff, which are intrinsic to the delivery of what we do. I think absolutely thinking about how, particularly my leadership in coming in, but also the current climate, as Gary alludes to, the need to transition, to innovate and develop, kind of compounds the leadership challenge, but it's something that all of the time is being mindful of them. Gary talked about the kind of mental health issues, the challenges that he may see on the kind of the student side. And we have that with staff as well. We need to kind of think about the community that in some ways that I preside over as leader, but really the kind of big thing has been about getting down to, I guess, among the people, among the colleagues, and trying to understand their problems. And I guess as a leader, one of the phrases that I keep using is that I can only solve the challenges that I know that are there. And it's really about trying to unpick what's going on and how we can address it. And by having that kind of better insight and really comes down to the communication piece again, setting that expectation. I want the team to engage with me as a leader. I want to be visible. And in a virtual world, that's not as easy as some people might think. Just being available on email, being available for a Zoom, it's actually that reaching out, that proactive, recognizing that some of the time people aren't there. And that they are remotely engaged, but that doesn't necessarily play out in the same way as if we were in the building. So it's trying to go that extra mile. And I think that that's certainly been one of the things since joining, and that kind of quality of perseverance, of kind of presence is really where I've tried to push. But I agree with what Gary's kind of said there. And I think that the one thing I would say is that taking on this opportunity at Brooks, and it's going well so far, touch wood, the big thing for me is that there is a massive opportunity. I think that within the crisis of COVID, thinking about blended learning, thinking about the new learners, what they want, what they expect, what learners will expect in 3, 5, 10 years to come off the back of this. This isn't a case of bouncing back. This is a case of bouncing forward. This is about thinking what the future of education is and can be, and actually making sure that the changes that we're making to adapt to COVID, we embrace and we really kind of make the most of moving forward as well.
Excellent. Brilliant. If you ask Chris, would he swap places with you now? Do you think he's happy to have stood down?
Oh, I mean, Chris had a great reign and moving Brooks forward in the direction. And in some ways, it's great to be able to come into a place where you can build and you're not kind of stripping it back to the foundations and trying to work again. So in that sense, I'm privileged. I guess there are some people that look in a kind of an unenviable way at the task that is there at the moment. And it's not for me to make that judgment of Chris, but like I say, I'm grateful of what I've inherited. And actually, I think the place is on the up, and I think we will continue to build. Brilliant. So Stephen, as principal of Chartwell College, you've had the benefit of actually meeting your students and seeing your premises. So which do you prefer as a starter? Do you prefer it with or without the students?
It certainly is much better when the students are here. 2 reasons. One, you can engage with them in a much better way But we're finding online that we're detecting a lot of mental health issues. I mean, these are, teenagers who are literally in prison. If I go back to when I was a teenager, I think I would have been jumping out the window by now. I was never in, and I think most teenagers are the same. They want to be out and about. So that is an issue. But we're getting by, and we're looking forward to them coming back. We're coming back maybe in a week or two, because we have our own boarding, so we can actually create our own bubble, similar to we did in November lockdown. So that is something we're looking at the moment. But going back to replacing leadership, a couple of things have come out with Amazon, and I think there are lots of examples of the number 2 or similar taking over from the number 1. It doesn't work. The number 1 is the driver. The number 2 is never the same type of person, the same charisma, the same drive. And I think the other issues will be that Andy is going to be compared. There's going to be comparisons every day between him and Bezos. And that's not good. Yeah, with Tim, he stepped in. He's new. And that's very different. And you get a different type of respect from day one. I'm not sure on Amazon whether the respect's going to change. Is it going to be just the same old thing? You turn up for work, the employees come along. It's no different. Whereas if somebody new is there, at least that new person, the new leader, like Tim probably will have new ideas. And when he meets with staff, he can talk about his new ideas. And that then encourages them, or vice versa. But it does make them think. It asks them to raise questions. So I'm not sure that replacing with somebody in the company is always a good move. And I think this boils down to another issue, that is the selection process. At board level or senior management level, it's their responsibility to make sure they employ the right person for that particular industry. And as we were saying, that you have to take into consideration of staff. Did they actually talk to the staff and think maybe it may not be a good idea to have Andy replace Jeff? And should we go out for somebody new? There must be a multitude of highly experienced leaders who have taken on the Amazon role. So they've cut out so many people who could have done an extraordinary job in Amazon. And as we were saying earlier on, they have problems. So maybe somebody new could identify and sort the problems, whereas at the moment it might just continue and it could affect Amazon. So that's my thing. It should be at a strategic level, should have been thought about, the job description, everything about that person who's going to replace Bezos. I mean, he's the world's richest man. He's developed a company from nothing to one of the biggest in the world. That takes some following. And to have somebody who's been there, I think, over 18, 20 years, is he going to change things? Does he know how to change things? Does he know any different?
It's interesting. Sorry to jump in, Stephen. Yeah. I think you make a great point. Psychologically, there's something called, I'm sure you guys know about it, but I'll share with you, something called homogenized thinking inside an organization, whereby people who stay inside an organization tend to think the same ways. And there's some very high profile cases, including 9/11, where people inside the CIA, they knew what was going to happen, but because there was homogenized thinking inside the organization, it needed somebody to come from the outside to be able to recognize what was going on. And you talked about David Moyes coming in as Manchester United manager. That might have been Sir Alex Ferguson's pick. I'm pretty certain it was.
I was going to say that about Bezos and Jassy. Yeah.
The idea this is the
his
pick,
puppet, really.
So I agree entirely with Stephen that if homogenized thinking is not necessarily that helpful or healthy for an organization, bringing in an outsider who sees it with fresh eyes, fresh relationships, fresh culture, often can lead to a much more healthy progression.
And also,
I'll
I think, yeah,
just play a slightly devil's advocate position on this as well. So I agree that that's important. I think that the nature of the process is important. But let's look at Apple for a moment. Let's look at Tim Cook in relation to Steve Jobs. Now, Steve Jobs, great innovator, right? I say this surrounded by Apple products. I'm sold. But was he a great CEO? Was he doing that great job? And then we look at what Tim Cook's done and we think about the transition and the challenge and how he's tried to do things that perhaps Steve Jobs was a little bit more reticent around. So I do think that in some ways we've got a bit of a wait and see game with Andy Jassy. I think it's trying to understand what he's going to do and what he's going to bring. And I don't want to write the guy off. I can say, in all honesty, Chris wasn't involved in my appointment. So the kind of Ferguson-Moyes analogy hopefully means that my future will be slightly more assured than what David's was. But I guess the thing that I'd say is that thinking about kind of where Apple's going now and what the kind of the changes in leadership bring, it's obviously going to be a massive challenge. I agree with the points that both Stephen and Gary make about where that is. But I think we need to kind of watch, wait and see. I think that there are pros and cons about having an executive chair that's actively involved. He's obviously set out his agenda in his letter to the Amazonians about what he wants to do with his life. Now he's not going to be kind of the CEO, but he's going to be a busy executive chair. And hopefully if he does that in a way, which I think we'll learn more about Bezos's leadership style now as he moves into that executive chair role, because he's going to be in a position where arguably the way that he behaves will impact how Andy Jassy works, operates, and the autonomy and freedom which he has to take things forward. And I think that given the challenges that Gary's outlined that the organisation continues to face, it could be a liberating kind of phase in their development if he can get that right, where Bezos hasn't.
Can I just jump in?
Points. Can I just make two quick points?
Yeah, you carry on, Stephen, and then we'll bring Gary in.
Yeah. One, I'm surprised at what they did at this time. The world has changed dramatically, and it does need new thinking. And the other thing is Bezos going to step back? Will he step back? That's the question.
And would you, if you were the wealthiest man in the world, and yeah,
well,
you want someone
that's
in your
been
pocket?
his life.
Yeah, exactly.
I was going to ask a similar point, slightly at a tangent, but the question I'm going to ask both Tim and Stephen is: do you think it's helpful if the leader stays? And I know, Tim, we were talking about your role. You know, is it better if the leader just goes and allows the new person just to have free rein, or are you constantly looking at the organisation through the lens of the previous leader? I don't know which the best is, but I can see pros and cons in both situations.
I think from a staff point of view, surely they'd be better off if the previous person went.
I agree.
Yeah, it's a new beginning. So go. Otherwise, the people who, and probably would be loyal to the previous person, are going to keep talking to him or her and not the new person. And that's not good for business.
And that was an issue for somebody like David Moyes when he came into Manchester United. When you saw the cameras panning to Sir Alex Ferguson in the stands all the time, he was there. He was quite clearly there still. Must have made it a huge weight for David Moyes, and it may have ultimately been the biggest factor in his demise. Tim, you were...
Yeah, one of the things that I think is a really difficult question that Gary poses about kind of the leader or previous leader being there, because I think that there's loads of dimensions to this. In what capacity, and what is their influence? I think certainly my experience of where I am, and like I say, no complaints. Chris is there in the background. He's working. He's doing his thing. He's retired formally from the role that now I hold. But I do think that the onus is on me to come in. I have a different leadership style. I have a different vision. If we want to extend the kind of Ferguson-Moyes analogy, it's almost like, how do we build what was being built previously? I think I've got this kind of different challenge, which is about building something different, taking it in a different direction, and moving on. Whereas I think the expectation on Moyes was continued success based on a legacy that Ferguson had put in place. So I do think that one of the challenges when we think about the kind of era that Amazon are moving into and what we're going to see Andy Jassy do, there is going to be a need for him to be different. I don't think that it will work if he is this groomed number two that is simply there to try and kick forward the agenda that Jeff's laid out. But the question, I think, and Stephen's exactly right in my mind, the extent to which the land is, or the path is being mapped out now by the executive chair. If the executive chair is going to interfere, then on a day-to-day level, operations, strategy, we've got a problem. But actually, if he's there to impart knowledge and guidance and experience, I really think we've got a kind of an opportunity. And I think I don't want to write the guy off here. If you look at his career and the success that he's had in Amazon in supporting over that period that he's been alongside Jeff, I think that we can look at that and we could say, well, to start with, I think people were skeptical about Tim Cook following Steve Jobs as the Apple CEO. I think if we look at kind of the examples with Google as well, where the internal candidate came along and kind of succeeded and looked what came after Larry and Sergey, we need to kind of think about all of these different dynamics and really kind of say, well, the proof's going to be in the pudding. It's a challenging time. Let's see whether he is in a position to kind of establish a vision that kind of builds on what Jeff has laid down and how that gets to the next step. Because we are going to be in a very different type of place in 12 months' time as we are in a post-COVID world, hopefully, and what that looks like. And it's going to be the ability to make the most of that. And I think the challenges that we've seen with regards to the business model of Amazon and the kind of the revenues increasing kind of dramatically, exponentially over a very short period kind of does present opportunity. But I suspect as well that Jeff will be distracted by other things. I mean, he talked about the engagement with the Washington Post, his philanthropic activity, all of which hopefully will give him that kind of new challenge. And I mean, I have to say that having someone with that experience in the background, if they're not meddling and they're not dictating, how can that not be valuable? But I do think that kind of trying to generalize, I think it is very much going to be down to example by case in terms of what that looks like.
Just picking up your point, and I'm looking at it psychotherapeutically here, Tim, that if you look at the outgoing person, this Alex Ferguson, the Jeff Bezos, whoever it is, I see all organizations as kind of families. And I think it's a really interesting model that if dad is gone, how much control do you want dad to have when his sons take over? And I think there has to be, going all Freudian on you here, an Oedipal split that has to happen, whereby the sons have to kill off the father for you to have healthy growth. Now, I know that you could come up with 101 examples where that just didn't happen, but I think in any family, when the sons take over, the dad has to step back and be the safety net underneath the sons on the high wire, rather than stand on the high wire with them. And that you're saying, well, would Bezos get involved? I tell you what, if Amazon go down the tubes in the next 18 months, oh boy, he'll get involved. He's not going to let his baby not have enough oxygen and die. That's not going to happen.
I agree.
I think also,
Stephen, last point from you, Stephen. Then I just want to ask you all two questions, and then
okay.
We're nearly at the end of the business brunch. But Stephen, your point.
Yeah, just if you look at from a purely business point of view, if you look at a corporation or a business that takes over another business, more often than not, they get rid of the senior management fairly quickly. And the reason for that is they want new thinking, new blood. So they get rid of the old people.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you. So last two questions, I'll ask you all in order. So I'll ask Tim, then Gary, then Stephen. First question, you're consulting for a huge multinational organization. They're looking to replace the leader. What's your one nugget of advice for the decision-making team?
God, blimey.
Anybody jump in? Give teams.
Okay, I'll jump in because I've done this. I would say do exactly what Tim has done. Don't hear, listen for the first 6 months, because everything you need to know, you will find out from people who work for you.
And Tim, you can't just agree with Gary on Gary.
I think Gary's back on. And I've been doing lots of listening. But I suppose the other thing that I would say, and I guess particularly that kind of directed to the appointments panel, is be honest with where you are. And actually, I think you need to kind of be really clear about what the challenges are you face. So we know that there are going to be a series of challenges that Andy Jassy is going to have to pick up around that. We've talked about the kind of the employment, we've talked about the challenges there, the kind of antitrust lawsuits that are in place against Amazon at the moment, and also some of the kind of challenges around counterfeit goods being sold. So there are some very clear weaknesses that Jeff leaves behind that we know that Andy's going to have to pick up. And I think that if you are clear about the challenges that you're expecting about that leader to pick up, like I said, with regards to my own position, it was that pressure to succeed, to come in and have that impact. Well, if you're coming into something that's deemed to be a success already, there's one direction, or generally one direction, let's say. I think where there are opportunities to develop or to fix or to improve and make better, that leader's coming in with a fighting chance at least. And I guess from my view with Andy Jassy, it's going to be a case of there are those challenges. We'll see how good he is at addressing them moving forward. And I certainly wish him the best of luck. No one wants to kind of see an incoming leader kind of tipping off with failure. So yeah, good luck to him on that.
Stephen?
Yeah, I think I would say to the appointment board is, where do you want this organisation to be in 5 years' time and in 10 years' time? Because that's the important thing. And then who is the right person to fulfill that role to get where you want to be?
Excellent. Brilliant. Thank you, Stephen. And my final question is a similar line, but if you're actually advising someone that is going to become the next leader of an organisation, what's your one nugget of advice to them?
Like, for me, that's an easy one. And I guess I've kind of learnt this at Brooks, and it's something that I've kind of tried to do throughout everything that I've done, is just be authentic. I think if you try to be something you're not, something that you're trying to kind of fill what you think that leader should be rather than being that leader, you're never going to make it. And I think that one of the things in being at Brooks is being myself. And I think that if I can add to the organisation and I can take it where it wants to go, then I'm doing my job, and actually that's what matters. And I think that as soon as I'm not in a position to do that, I'm not the right leader.
Gary?
I'm going to go countercultural here, as you probably expect me to do, Richard. Don't lead, walk alongside the people who you employ. Don't try to be a leader, support the people who can help your business grow.
Excellent. And final word from Stephen.
Just listen to the staff, listen to your customers. Before you make any decisions, just listen.
Gents, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Gary. Thank you, Stephen, for joining us on the Business Brunch. And we look forward to seeing you soon. And good luck in the new role, Tim.
Thanks, Richard.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Cheers.
Thank you.